Your silence is killing them. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you about something profoundly important today. Something that, if ignored, erodes the very fabric of our humanity. Your silence. Your silence in the face of pain, injustice, and suffering. Because when you choose silence, it is not just you who suffer, so it is everyone who depends on your voice for strength, for guidance, and for truth. Silence is not neutrality. It's not a passive act. It is an active allowance of wrongdoings to flourish. When we say nothing as others face harm, we are choosing complicity over courage. Think about that for a moment. By failing to speak, we enable the very forces that destroy lives, communities, and even our own integrity. Why do we stay silent? Fear, perhaps. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of making things worse. But let me tell you this, fear is not a justification for inaction. It's an obstacle to overcome. Courage, after all, is not the absence of fear, it is the willingness to act despite it. When you refuse to speak out, you are not just failing others, so you are failing yourself. The guilt, the regret, the endless question of what if I had said something? These become weights that burden your soul. And what's worse, you rob the world of your unique ability to create change. But here's the truth, your voice matters. It is a tool, a weapon, a gift. When wielded wisely, it can change lives. Even a single word, spoken at the right time, can alter the course of someone's existence. Imagine the ripple effect. One act of courage from you can inspire others to act, and suddenly, a wave of change begins. This is not just about individual courage, it's about creating a culture where silence is no longer tolerated, where we hold each other accountable, where we speak truth, even when it shakes the very ground we stand on. So, I urge you, stop waiting. Stop assuming someone else will speak up. Be the voice. Be the one who says, this is wrong, or this must change. It might be uncomfortable. It might cost you something. But the cost of silence, that is far greater. It is a price paid in broken lives, shattered trust, and wasted potential. Your silence is killing them. But your voice could save them. Speak, not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. Speak, because the world needs the truth that only you can offer. Speak, because courage is contagious, and when one person stands, others will follow. Silence in the face of suffering and injustice is often mistaken for neutrality. People convince themselves that staying quiet is a way to avoid taking sides, to maintain peace, or to remain uninvolved. But this perspective is a dangerous illusion. Silence is not passive. It is an active choice. And the cost of that choice can be devastating, and not just to the person choosing silence, but to those who are directly affected by the issues being ignored. When we choose not to speak, we create space for harm to grow unchecked. Imagine a scenario where someone is being bullied. A bystander sees what's happening but chooses to look away or remains silent. Perhaps they tell themselves it's not their problem, or they worry that intervening might make them a target too. But in doing so, they fail to see the broader picture. The bully is emboldened by the silence, the victim feels more isolated and helpless, and the cycle of harm continues. In this situation, silence is not neutrality, it is an implicit endorsement of the bully's actions. The cost of silence extends far beyond individual moments. Societies have faced catastrophic consequences because too many people stayed silent at critical times. History is filled with examples where silence allowed injustices to escalate into atrocities. Oppressive systems, corruption, and systemic discrimination thrive when those who witness them fail to speak out. When silence becomes the norm, it creates a culture where injustice is tolerated and even normalized. This culture doesn't just harm the immediate victims, it weakens the moral foundation of the entire community. On a personal level, silence can also erode one's integrity. There's a psychological toll that comes with choosing not to act when you know you should. People often experience guilt or regret when they reflect on moments when they could have made a difference but didn't. This internal conflict can lead to feelings of powerlessness or even self-loathing. The longer one stays silent in the face of wrongdoing, the harder it becomes to break free from the inertia of inaction. Silence, in many ways, is seductive. It offers a sense of safety. You don't have to confront uncomfortable truths, engage in conflict, or risk your social standing. But this safety is a mirage. Over time, the consequences of silence accumulate, both internally and externally. Inaction can damage relationships, as those who suffer often perceive silence as betrayal. It can also erode trust, both trust in oneself and the trust others place in you. It's important to understand that silence is not always malicious. Sometimes, it comes from a place of fear, confusion, or uncertainty. People might stay quiet because they feel unqualified to speak, or they're unsure of what to say. They might worry about the backlash they could face or the potential repercussions of standing up for what's right. These concerns are valid, but they are not insurmountable. Silence may feel like a shield in the moment, but in reality, it is a prison or barrier that keeps you from making a meaningful impact. Speaking up requires effort, courage, and sometimes sacrifice. But the alternative here, the cost of silence here, is far greater. Silence allows harm to multiply. It sends a message that the status quo is acceptable, that the suffering of others is unimportant, and that those in power can act without consequence. It denies victims the support they need and deserve, and it perpetuates cycles of harm that could have been disrupted by a single voice. Consider the ripple effect of speaking up versus staying silent. A single act of courage can inspire others to take action, creating a chain reaction that leads to meaningful change. Conversely, each instance of silence reinforces the perception that nothing can or will be done, further entrenching the problems at hand. The stakes are too high to ignore the consequences of our choices. The cost of silence is not theoretical, it is real, tangible, and far-reaching. It is measured in lost lives, broken spirits, and missed opportunities for progress. It is felt in the growing chasm between what is and what could be. It is seen in the faces of those who suffer alone because no one was willing to stand beside them. We must recognize that our voices have power. When used responsibly, they can challenge injustice, comfort the suffering, and inspire hope. Speaking up may not always lead to immediate solutions, but it is a necessary first step. It signals that you see what is happening, that you care, and that you are willing to take a stand. In the end, silence is never neutral, it is a choice with profound consequences. The question we must all ask ourselves is this: are we willing to pay the cost of that choice? Or will we find the courage to speak, to act, and to create a world where silence no longer enables harm? The decision is ours to make, and the stakes could not be higher. Speech is one of the most powerful tools we possess. It is not merely a mechanism for expressing thoughts or ideas, it is a vehicle for truth, a means of shaping the world around us, and a profound responsibility. In the face of injustice or harm, the choice to speak or to remain silent is not a neutral act. It is a moral decision, one that carries weight and consequence. When we fail to speak up, we abdicate this responsibility, leaving a void where truth and courage should reside. The essence of moral responsibility lies in recognizing that we are interconnected. Our actions, or lack thereof, have an impact on others, whether we intend them to or not. This interconnectedness means that our voices matter, not just for our own sake but for the sake of those who may be powerless to speak for themselves. In a world filled with suffering, inequality, and injustice, silence becomes a tacit endorsement of the status quo. By failing to speak, we allow harm to continue unchallenged, and in doing so, we fail to fulfill our ethical duty to one another. One of the most common reasons people avoid speaking up is the fear of making things worse. They worry that their words might be clumsy or inadequate, that they might offend, or that they could inadvertently create more conflict. These fears, while understandable, are often exaggerated. More often than not, the act of speaking up, even imperfectly, is a vital first step toward change. It is better to risk saying the wrong thing and learn from it than to say nothing at all and perpetuate harm through inaction. Speech is not just about confronting external problems, it is also about confronting internal truths. When we choose to remain silent, we often do so because we are avoiding uncomfortable realities within ourselves. Speaking up requires us to examine our own beliefs, biases, and fears. It forces us to confront the dissonance between our values and our actions. This process can be difficult, even painful, but it is essential for personal growth and integrity. To speak with moral clarity, we must first ensure that our words align with our principles. The responsibility of speech extends beyond simply pointing out what is wrong. It involves articulating solutions, offering hope, and inspiring others to act. Words have the power to heal as well as to challenge. They can provide comfort to those who are suffering, encouragement to those who are struggling, and guidance to those who are lost. But to wield this power effectively, we must speak with intention, authenticity, and compassion. It is important to recognize that speech is not always easy, nor is it without risk. Those who speak out against injustice often face backlash, criticism, or even hostility. This is especially true in environments where silence has become the norm, and dissent is met with resistance. Yet, it is precisely in these situations that the responsibility to speak becomes most critical. When truth is suppressed, when harm is normalized, and when fear silences voices, it is the moral obligation of those who can speak to do so. There is a profound ripple effect that comes with taking this responsibility seriously. When one person speaks out, it can inspire others to do the same. This ripple effect can create a movement, one that challenges entrenched systems of harm and creates space for new possibilities. But it all begins with a single voice and a single act of courage. The responsibility to be that voice, to take that first step, lies with each of us. It is also worth noting that the responsibility of speech does not always mean speaking loudly or publicly. Sometimes, the most impactful words are spoken quietly, in private, to someone who needs to hear them. A kind word, a gentle reminder, or a thoughtful question can be just as powerful as a bold declaration. The key is to recognize when your voice is needed and to use it with care and purpose. Failure to embrace this responsibility has consequences not just for others but for ourselves. When we choose silence, we undermine our own sense of agency and moral clarity. Over time, this can lead to feelings of helplessness, regret, and even a sense of betrayal toward our own values. On the other hand, when we choose to speak, we affirm our commitment to those values. We strengthen our integrity, and we contribute to a culture where truth and justice are possible. The moral responsibility of speech is not optional. It is an essential part of what it means to live with integrity and to contribute meaningfully to the world around us. It requires courage, effort, and a willingness to face discomfort, but the rewards far outweigh the risks. By choosing to speak, we become agents of change, defenders of truth, and advocates for those who cannot advocate for themselves. In a world where silence too often enables harm, let us remember that our voices are not just a privilege, they are a duty. Courage is often romanticized as the extraordinary quality of heroes, the rare virtue possessed by those who perform remarkable feats or stand up in the face of overwhelming odds. But courage is not a luxury, nor is it reserved for extraordinary individuals. It is a necessity for anyone who seeks to live a meaningful life. Without courage, we are unable to face the challenges that define our existence, confront the injustices that surround us, or even remain true to our values. Courage is not optional if we want to contribute positively to the world. It is an essential component of human integrity. At its core, courage is not the absence of fear but the willingness to act despite fear. It is the recognition that some things are more important than our comfort, our safety, or even our immediate self-interest. Fear is natural. It is a biological response to perceived threats. However, when fear governs our actions, or worse, when it paralyzes us, it prevents us from fulfilling our potential. Courage, then, is not about erasing fear but about mastering it, about deciding that the risks of action are outweighed by the costs of inaction. In moments where courage is called for, the stakes are often high. Perhaps you witness an act of injustice, but speaking out might alienate you from friends or colleagues. Maybe you see a situation where someone is being mistreated, and intervening could draw unwanted attention to yourself. These are not hypothetical scenarios, they are the real-life dilemmas we all face. And in these moments, courage is not a luxury. It is the compass that guides us to do what is right, even when it is difficult. Living without courage is not a neutral state, it has consequences. When we avoid acting out of fear, we may find temporary relief, but it comes at the cost of our self-respect. We start to internalize the idea that we are incapable of standing up for what matters, and this erosion of confidence can lead to a cycle of inaction. Over time, this reluctance to act can make us complicit in the very problems we avoid addressing. It is not just about the external consequence of what happens to others because we failed to act, but also about the internal toll it takes on our sense of purpose and integrity. Courage is not only necessary for confronting injustice but also for confronting the truth. Often, the hardest truths to face are the ones about ourselves, our biases, our shortcomings, our failures. A lack of courage keeps us in denial, allowing us to cling to comforting illusions rather than embrace the discomfort of growth. Yet, personal growth is impossible without this willingness to face the uncomfortable. Courage is what enables us to look in the mirror and say, "I can do better," and then take the steps to make that a reality. Moreover, courage is contagious. When one person stands up and acts with integrity, it inspires others to do the same. In the presence of courage, people feel empowered to overcome their own fears and take action. This is how movements begin, how change is sparked, and how progress is made. Think of the countless moments in history where a single act of bravery set off a chain reaction that transformed societies. None of that would have been possible without the initial spark of courage from one individual. It's important to understand that courage is not always dramatic. It doesn't always involve grand gestures or public displays. Sometimes, courage is quiet. It's the decision to have a difficult conversation, to admit when you're wrong, or to advocate for someone when no one else will. These acts may seem small, but their impact is profound. Each instance of courage, no matter how seemingly insignificant, reinforces our capacity for integrity and strengthens the fabric of our communities. Courage is also a skill that can be cultivated. Just as we build physical strength through repeated effort, we build courage by practicing it. Start small. Speak up in situations where the risks are manageable, and gradually challenge yourself to confront more significant fears. Over time, you'll find that what once seemed daunting becomes easier, and your capacity for courageous action expands. This practice is not just about building personal resiliency, it's about preparing yourself to make a difference when it matters most. In a world where challenges are inevitable, courage is the bridge between intention and action. It is what transforms good intentions into meaningful outcomes. Without it, our values remain theoretical, our convictions remain untested, and our potential remains unrealized. Courage is not a luxury reserved for moments of crisis, it is a daily necessity for living with purpose and integrity. The necessity of courage extends to every corner of life. It is needed in our personal relationships, where honesty and vulnerability require us to take emotional risks. It is needed in our workplaces, where standing up for ethical principles may mean challenging authority. It is needed in our communities, where speaking out against injustice can disrupt the status quo. In each of these areas, courage is the foundation for growth, change, and the pursuit of a better world. Ultimately, courage is the recognition that our lives are defined by the choices we make in the face of fear. It is what allows us to stand up, speak out, and stay true to our values when it would be easier to remain silent or complacent. Without courage, we cannot fulfill our responsibility to ourselves, to others, or to the world. It is not an optional quality, reserved for rare moments of heroism. It is a fundamental necessity for a life well lived. Every action we take, no matter how small, sends ripples through the world around us. This is especially true when we decide to act in the face of injustice, suffering, or adversity. Often, we underestimate the power of a single action, thinking that our efforts are too insignificant to make a difference. But the truth is that change rarely begins with sweeping transformations. More often, it starts with one courageous step, one voice, or one simple decision to stand for what is right. These small acts create ripples that grow, spreading outward and inspiring others to act. When one person takes a stand, it does more than address the immediate situation. It sends a powerful message to those who are watching. It says, "This is not acceptable," or "Something needs to change." For those who may feel powerless, it offers hope. For those who are uncertain, it provides clarity. And for those who are complacent, it serves as a wake-up call. One action, no matter how modest, can be the catalyst for a chain reaction of courage and accountability. Consider the impact of speaking up in a group setting where harmful behavior is taking place. Imagine someone makes a hurtful or inappropriate comment, and most people choose to stay silent out of fear or discomfort. Then one person decides to address it, calmly and respectfully. That single act of speaking up can shift the entire dynamic of the room. It validates the feelings of anyone who may have been hurt by the comment, sets a standard for what is acceptable behavior, and empowers others to follow suit in the future. The ripple effect of that one moment can extend far beyond the immediate situation, influencing how people think and act long after the event has passed. The ripple effect is not just about influencing others, it is also about creating momentum within ourselves. Every time we choose to act, we reinforce our own sense of agency and courage. The more we practice standing up for what matters, the more confident and capable we become. This internal growth further amplifies our ability to inspire and lead others. Our actions, no matter how small, build on each other, creating a cumulative effect that extends far beyond what we might initially imagine. We often think of change as something that requires grand gestures or large-scale efforts. While these are certainly impactful, they are not the only path to making a difference. History is filled with examples of monumental movements that began with seemingly minor actions. Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat, a student organizing a small protest, a whistleblower speaking out against corruption. These moments may have seemed insignificant at the time, but their ripples grew into waves that transformed societies. It is easy to feel overwhelmed by the scale of the problems we face in the world today. Climate change, systemic inequality, political polarization. These challenges can seem insurmountable. But the ripple effect reminds us that we are not powerless. While no single action may solve these issues entirely, every positive step contributes to the broader effort. A single voice can inspire others to join, creating a collective impact that is far greater than the sum of its parts. The ripple effect also works in the realm of kindness and support. Small gestures of compassion can have profound impacts on those who receive them. A kind word, a listening ear, or an offer of help can change the course of someone's day, or even their life. When we choose to act with empathy and care, we create ripples of positivity that spread far beyond our immediate interactions. These ripples can inspire others to pay kindness forward, creating a chain reaction of goodwill that enriches entire communities. The ripple effect is not always positive. Inaction, indifference, and silence also create ripples. When we fail to address harmful behavior, we normalize it. When we ignore suffering, we perpetuate it. The ripples of inaction can spread just as far and wide as the ripples of action, but their consequences are far more damaging. This is why it is so important to choose our actions consciously and to recognize the impact they have on the world around us. The beauty of the ripple effect is that it allows us to start where we are, with what we have. We don't need to have all the answers or solve all the problems at once. We simply need to take the first step, trusting that our actions will inspire others to do the same. When we act with courage, integrity, and intention, our efforts become part of something much larger than ourselves. The ripple effect is a reminder that we are all connected. Our actions influence those around us, who in turn influence others. By choosing to act, we become part of a chain of positive change that extends far beyond what we can see or measure. Each ripple we create contributes to a wave of transformation, proving that no effort is ever wasted, and no voice is ever too small. The world is shaped not just by grand gestures but by the countless small actions that, together, create a better future. Silence in the face of wrongdoing is far more than mere inaction. It is a powerful force that enables harm, perpetuates injustice, and emboldens those who act without regard for others. While silence may feel like a neutral choice, it is anything but. When we stay silent, particularly in situations where our voice could make a difference, we inadvertently contribute to the problem. We give our consent to the status quo, and in doing so, we become complicit in the very injustices we might wish to oppose. Injustice thrives in an environment where it is unchallenged. Those who perpetuate harm often rely on the silence of others to maintain their power and avoid accountability. When no one speaks out, it creates the illusion that their actions are acceptable or unimportant. This emboldens them to continue and often escalate their behavior. Silence becomes a shield that protects the wrongdoer, allowing their actions to go unchecked and unpunished. This is true in interpersonal dynamics, workplaces, communities, and even on a societal level. Consider how silence functions in a toxic workplace. A manager may consistently mistreat their employees, creating a hostile and unhealthy environment. Other employees, witnessing this behavior, may feel uncomfortable but choose not to speak up. They might justify their silence by thinking it's not their business, fearing retaliation, or assuming someone else will address it. This collective silence sends a message to the manager that their behavior is tolerated, and to the mistreated employees, it communicates that they are alone and unsupported. Over time, the toxicity spreads, affecting morale, productivity, and well-being. What began as one person's harmful behavior is amplified by the silence of others. On a larger scale, silence has enabled some of history's darkest chapters. Oppressive regimes, systemic discrimination, and human rights abuses have all been sustained, at least in part, by the silence of those who had the power to speak out but chose not to. This is not to say that every silent person shares equal responsibility with the perpetrators of harm, but their inaction creates the conditions in which harm can flourish. Silence allows oppression to remain hidden, makes victims feel invisible, and perpetuates a culture of fear and complicity. There is a psychological component to this dynamic that cannot be ignored. Many people remain silent not out of malice or indifference but because they feel powerless, afraid, or unsure of how to act. They may believe their voice won't make a difference or worry about the personal consequences of speaking out. These fears are valid, but they also highlight the importance of courage and collective action. When people see others speaking up, it can inspire them to do the same, breaking the cycle of silence and empowering more voices to join the call for change. The role of silence in empowering injustice is particularly insidious because it often disguises itself as neutrality or politeness. People tell themselves they don't want to create conflict or that it's better to keep the peace. But this kind of peace is illusory. It is built on the suffering of others and maintained by the refusal to confront uncomfortable truths. True peace requires justice. And justice cannot be achieved without the willingness to challenge what is wrong. Silence also has a corrosive effect on those who choose it. Over time, staying silent in the face of injustice can lead to feelings of guilt, regret, and a diminished sense of self-respect. People may look back on situations where they could have acted differently and feel haunted by the realization that their inaction contributed to someone else's suffering. This internal conflict can create a deep sense of dissatisfaction and disconnection from one's values. By contrast, speaking out, even when it's difficult, reinforces a sense of integrity and alignment with one's principles. It is important to recognize that breaking the silence does not always require grand gestures or public declarations. Sometimes, it's as simple as having a private conversation, asking a question, or expressing concern. Small acts of courage can disrupt the power of silence and begin to shift the dynamics of a situation. Each time someone chooses to speak up, it weakens the grip of injustice and empowers others to find their voice. Breaking silence is not without risks, and those risks should not be taken lightly. Speaking out can lead to backlash, alienation, or personal sacrifice. But the risks of remaining silent are far greater, not only for the individuals directly affected by injustice but for society as a whole. Silence erodes trust, enables harm, and perpetuates cycles of inequality and abuse. The cost of silence is borne not just by the immediate victims but by everyone who values fairness, dignity, and human decency. The role of silence in empowering injustice underscores the importance of individual and collective responsibility. Each of us has a role to play in creating a more just and equitable world. This begins with recognizing the impact of our silence and choosing to act when we see harm being done. By breaking the silence, we disrupt the systems that allow injustice to thrive and create space for truth, accountability, and healing. The decision to speak out is rarely easy, but it is always significant. In choosing to raise our voices, we challenge the forces that rely on silence to sustain their power. We stand with those who cannot stand alone, and we signal our commitment to a world where justice is not an exception but the rule. Silence may feel safe, but it is not neutral. It is a choice, and its consequences are far-reaching. The question we must ask ourselves is whether we are willing to bear the weight of those consequences or whether we will find the courage to speak and create ripples of change. Choosing responsibility over comfort is one of the most profound and transformative decisions a person can make. It is a commitment to face the challenges of life head-on, to accept the weight of our actions, and to contribute meaningfully to the world around us. While comfort often seems like the more appealing path, offering safety, ease, and predictability, it is rarely the path that leads to growth, fulfillment, or a better society. Responsibility, though demanding and sometimes uncomfortable, is the foundation upon which purpose, progress, and integrity are built. At its essence, responsibility requires us to acknowledge our role in the larger tapestry of life. It is the recognition that our choices, actions, and inactions have consequences not only for ourselves but for others and the world we inhabit. Responsibility asks us to consider not just what is easy but what is right. This shift in perspective can be daunting, as it involves stepping outside the cocoon of